moment, and we
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
methane emissions, and it's one of the things that I did a live TikTok yesterday. I just had a chat on there, and I think live TikTok's actually quite cool. And it's a really good way of getting chat with people. And
Yeah.
there was someone on there, and I forget what his name is now. And I just thought to myself, it's one of those times where I wish I could have just pulled you in as well, uh, and we could have just pincered because it was 110% brainwashing, head in the sand, blank blanket answer. And every time it wasn't even the subject of my TikTok. It was it was mentioned because we were just talking about farming in the TikTok. Because as you know, most people don't know what tractor you drive or what animals you've got. But then there's always people that seem to chime in to attack you because you're killing the planet. So for those of you for the people who might be watching this who don't know Andrew, um, he's someone that's done a lot of social media around this, and I didn't know if you want the opportunity to chat about that for a minute because
Yeah, well, I'll kind of take you through my red pill moment if you like how I came to the realization that I had been lied to for years. And I suppose I sort of have to go back to when I was at uni and I done my dissertation on greenhouse gas emissions from dairy cows. Now, this was back in like 2011. So this was all still very sort of new, like it wasn't chatted about much. And I got two advisors from Queen's University Belfast who were two climate scientists. And I didn't really know what I was talking about. I was literally just a third year at uni. They were giving me guidance on what to do. But one thing that really stands out in my head, even though it's now 14 years later, was that they were so insistent that I used a thing called Scope 3 emissions. And I remember questioning the two climate scientists about why was I using scope 3? Scope 3 basically means you try and include every possible emission. Like the fact that there might be some rainforest cut down in Brazil to grow soya, which is fed to my cows. Like we are trying to capture everything. And they insisted I use tier 3, scope 3, so I went down that route. I done my dissertation. I got a very good mark for it. I worked out the carbon emissions of dairy cows on a grazing system and on an intensive system. And it wasn't until 4 or 5 years later when I first heard that methane was a short-lived greenhouse gas. So 70% of the emissions that I calculated for my dissertation were from methane, and I had just always accepted what I was told that that was the same as burning coal, essentially. But I heard that then that methane was short-lived. Biogenic methane actually was cyclical in nature. And then it suddenly just clicked in my head. It's like, hold on a minute. The methane from my cows, it doesn't come from underground. It literally has to come from grass, which takes it from the air. And I spent a year convinced that I'd missed something. Like I just wasn't understanding it properly. There was something I was missing until I finally got enough confidence to think that I was actually correct, done enough reading to know that I wasn't the only one who was pointing this out. And that's kind of then when I started mentioning it on YouTube, mentioning it on TikTok. It was probably several years later by that point, actually. And it's astonishing to me that people don't realize what has happened. Essentially, the fossil fuel industry has deflected attention off themselves and has successfully managed to demonize agriculture when the entire methane emissions from my cows is factually not contributing to global warming. Like, it's mental.
I find it incredible because a bit like I'm not necessarily someone that's very good at research. I kind of just do my thing and I'm interested in what I'm interested in. But part of the issue I found is you just sort of go through life assuming that you're part of the problem and you're trying your best to do everything else as sustainably as possible to sort of counteract that. And I took my son for a look around his secondary school, and they were talking about global warming and things like this, and it was on a board. They were teaching it in school, and I
Yeah.
sort of walked out spitting. Like my son's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "That's," and it just makes me so cross. And
Yeah,
it's I knew I'd heard certain things by then, and it's really that was when I started to look for it. And I think it was just around the same time as you released the upright version, not the YouTube
yeah,
version, the upright version, and it suddenly, I would say that really made it all click into place. And once you start talking about it and thinking about it and looking at it, it's a bit like the red pill moment made me laugh the most because
yeah,
in the Matrix they say you can feel it. You've known the truth your whole life, but you know it's God.
yeah, yes,
You don't know why. You don't know,
yeah,
and you've gone along your whole life thinking to yourself, "This can't be right." My father-in-law's been saying, "Well, of course it's nonsense," but you don't know why. And then
yeah,
is slapped in the face with this methane cycle, and you're like, there's the missing piece of the puzzle. And
yeah. And it's not like there wasn't scientists talking about this before. Like there was. There has been for 2 decades, like climate scientists saying, hold on a minute, the way we're calculating methane from cows is grossly unfair. There's a guy, Miles Allen, he's been at it for years. But they are really bad at communication and they cannot simplify it down to make it impact normal people and farmers. So that's sort of, I suppose, I think why it's sort of gained more traction from the way I've done it, because I am simplifying it and trying to actually make it understandable, not getting bogged down in the minute details, just pointing out the fundamental flaw in the way methane is calculated.
I think that's spot on because my children have watched your videos and they're now understanding much more about it. And I think that getting it out there to because I think that's why social media is incredible, and that's what I've really noticed with mine. Mine keeps growing all the time, and every time it grows, you get more people that trust what you say. And as long as you are reputable and you are honest, and I try to just tell the truth flat out, people really respect that. And actually, it's an incredible tool for spreading a message. Um, and I would say that can really work with the methane videos, I think, because people go, well, I trust, I can see, I know this is a real person talking, or they interact with you on social media and things. And I think that builds a massive trust. And I think we've got an opportunity now to spread it quite far and wide.
Trust is important, and I go out of my way to make sure I don't make any mistakes. Like I go out of my way. And over the last 2 years, I have had plenty of interactions with people who are convinced that I am wrong. I had one podcast I done with a guy and he kind of duped me. Like he seemed lovely. I agreed to do it with him. And again, it was kind of, I was of the impression that he just wanted to understand my point of view. But in fact, he was like a left-wing nutter who was a total climate like fanatic. And his first moment of the podcast, he literally just started attacking me. But I turned it around, and over the course of an hour, I got him in so many knots and pointed out so many things that were fundamental flaws that honestly, by the end of it, I think he was half convinced himself. Like, because they use this, like the people who try to say that agriculture is a problem, they'll use the same arguments all the time. And once you've heard them once, like I've rebutted the same arguments so many times now that I'm actually like really good at delivering a killer blow if they make a mistake. And but it's just about trying to get that across to other people. Like a very common one is if you go and speak to a climate scientist and you say to them, yeah, well, methane is short-lived from dairy cows, so it doesn't contribute to warming. And the herd numbers are stable, so it's a stable amount of methane in the atmosphere. So essentially, the methane from cows are net zero already. Every single time, a climate scientist will say, yes, but there's a lot more cows than there was in the 1930s. This is always their statement. But then the rebuttal to that is what other industry or sector has to make up for historic emissions? Like the airline industry isn't going to have to make up for the flights that they took place in the 1970s. So again, it's like this idea that agriculture is just being treated differently. and all we're asking is to be treated the same. And they have no answer for that. They have no answer.
And that is what you're up against in farming all the time. I used to have a shop in a city, and you were there talking to people all the time. They'd ask you questions about this, and my shop was actually in Cambridge, and I remember one of the Cambridge colleges stopped serving beef because they didn't have it on the menu anymore, and I think they had vegan days and stuff like this. And
Yeah.
we had a lot of we because we sold fruit and vegetables and things too. We had a lot of vegan customers, and in fact, a lot of the customers I had who were vegan were wonderful people and were just quietly vegan. There's a massive difference between vegans and activists, and
Yeah.
I found that that was the that was what was driving all this sort of aggression almost, and it is quite aggressive. And yeah, so there was a lot around, and that was, I mean, that was sort of 10 years ago around then it really started to kick off. But post COVID, it did drop slightly.
I think we have passed peak woke, 100%.
I really,
And common sense is prevailing again.
because I just think to myself, I'm allowed to be compassionate for others without being woke, and you don't have to be ridiculous and just be afraid to say stuff or have to
Yeah.
do stuff to cover your own backside. I mean,
Yeah.
I was on the comedy circuit for years, and that had a very similar culture. And we had a lot of the basis of comedy was based on the woke side of things. And what I mean by that is lineups were chosen not on ability, they were chosen on who they were and things like this.
Yeah.
Some people you can agree with it or you can't. But if you look at things like Live at the Apollo or BBC panel shows that were comedy, they've started to go down a line of comedy that people aren't actually interested in because they just want
No. Yeah.
to find it funny anymore. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think you have to be Bernard Manning being racist. You don't have to do that, but I don't think any of us are racist.
But there has been a huge backlash against the people in charge, whether it is big film studios with movies or with TV executives and their panel shows. Like the public have had a huge backlash against them being told what they're meant to enjoy.
Yes.
And I've seen it with like movies, especially. Like comedies are just not funny anymore. But if you go back and watch the actual funny comedy movies from like 5 or 10 years ago, they just wouldn't be made nowadays. But I have a sneaking suspicion that in the next few years we're going to get back to actually funny movies again. I think we have passed that phase.
I think once everyone, I think if we're sort of living in a world where everyone has to get on, then I think then you need to accept that things will be said. Like, I don't. Do you ever watch like Ricky Gervais or someone like that? He's a prime example,
Yeah,
quite outspoken, but he does say that when someone says I'm offended by your joke, he says, no, because you're laughing at all the others. You're offended at the one
yeah,
about you.
yeah,
And
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
to laugh about others, you have to be able to laugh about you.
The most ironic thing of all, which just really like blows my mind, is that the tolerant people are actually the people on the center right,
It
and the intolerant people are the people on the left. Like, when did that happen?
really does feel
Genuinely, when did that happen?
same type because they do seem to often hold the hand of this kind of attitude, and
Yeah,
and it's a blunt, blind. Like for example, if someone presents me with something that completely changes my way of looking at something, I'll look at it. I won't push it down and say, no, no, you're wrong. If I think
correct.
I don't know something, I'm the first person to go, God, that's blown my mind. I'll have to look into it. And I think that's how we all have to be but I think when you're in farming, it changes. Well, day to day farming doesn't change much, but there are things that happen every day that change your point of view or change the way you do something. You might, have to turn on a sixpence all the time and you learn all the time,
Yeah,
constantly. And I think that drives your brain to be that way. And I would happily be convinced black was white if the evidence was right. And I just think
yeah.
not no willing to change your mind is what's ruining this country in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, and that goes filters straight through into the government because we might, if we get time, talk about our favourite subject, the government and net zero, because
Yeah.
it's driving me mad, and I sort of talk about it a bit, but it's sort of one of those things that it's again against particularly agriculture because we hold a lot of the cards that they want. I watched one of your videos recently. I often watch them when I'm having my lunch. I'm not a stalker or nothing.
That's okay. I'm glad you're watching them, to be honest.
You know what it's like when you're in farming, all you really want to watch and read is farming. That's kind of
Yeah.
sort of everything I do is that. And I was watching one, and you were talking about a road that had been built on your grass,
Hasn't been built. Hasn't been built. Yeah.
cost nearly as much as a bridge in China that's been built and nothing has been built.
Yeah.
That's the one. And so it's one of those things where that kind of thing is where, but we're the problem of net. We're the problem for net zero. We're the ones driving net zero, and agriculture and whatever is contributing to it, and we're having to cut emissions of our livestock because of net zero, and obviously the things there's conspiracies about possible conspiracies about necessarily BlackRock, buying up farmland because of the inheritance tax, and people in each other's pockets and stuff. And so I don't know what you think about net zero on that side of things, or if it's a conspiracy by the government just to get to net zero. And I think it could be something across the board, all of those.
It's it's not a conspiracy theory, I don't think. But the way I put it to people is that people have just it's like they're what benefits them has aligned with net zero. So for political parties in 2019, it seemed like this was the way to go. Everyone was talking about how climate change really mattered. You had Greta Thunberg on the news every night. So politically, the political parties followed that route because they had to get votes. However, they didn't actually have to do anything at that point. It was all just empty words. It wasn't going to cost any money. And then we fast forward now to 6 years later, and they actually have to deliver some of this stuff. They actually have to spend money. They actually have to make people's food more expensive, make fuel more expensive. And suddenly, the second there's any kind of cost to this statement of we care about the planet, we need to get to net zero, the entire population is totally turned against it. They no longer are willing to spend a penny on carbon, which is just a fact. And a really good source of evidence for that was an ASDA survey done in 2023. And ASDA asked their consumers to rank their priorities, and carbon emissions came like fifth from the bottom on a list of like 30 things. So the public are just not willing to pay for this. They've turned against it, and politics is turning against it now too. So I think the whole net zero agenda is just going to quietly fade in the next 5 or 6 years. The biggest barrier to that happening is that politicians have hung their hats on how important this is. So until there is a big political change, it's not going to change. But I am very hopeful that Labour will not be getting back in unless Reform and the Conservatives really screw up and split the vote and somehow Labour wins again. But I think next election, very good chance that some of this net zero stuff disappears.
Well, I noticed a big difference in my shop premises. We did a had a lot of people talking about zero plastic, zero waste refills, so they could come and buy their washing up liquid in their own jars and all this kind of thing, up until COVID. And then when COVID hit, it's as if they realised that was actually a waste of their time. And
Yeah.
overnight, I just was left with it all, and
Yeah. And I've got a really good example of where it's not a conspiracy theory, okay, but it's an example of how companies will manipulate people to make to their own advantage. And the example is plastic. So in like the 70s and 80s, plastic was seen as a bad product because it never decomposed. It was just always there. And it was the plastic industry which then convinced everyone that plastic could be recycled and that therefore it wasn't actually a bad product. But only 10% of plastic that is put into the recycling bin today is actually recycled. 90% of the plastic which people take the time to actually recycle still ends up in landfill. But everyone chooses to believe that their plastic bottles are being recycled because they put it in a blue bin. It's like another great example, same sort of trend, is BP, the giant fossil fuel company. BP was the one who came up with the carbon footprint because it took the responsibility of them as a company and put the responsibility onto the consumer. You know, it's your carbon footprint. It's your fault if you're killing the planet. Like, it's all just manipulation and marketing. It's mental.
Have you ever watched Mad Men?
No.
Do you know what it is?
A movie?
It's a television series, and
Okay.
the real beginnings of marketing on Madison Avenue in New York. And it's really interesting because it was marketing products at any cost for the biggest amount of money. So we're talking about the boom eras of things like Coca-Cola, and other big brands of American that are ingrained in American culture. And it's a really interesting show, and it's not all about that, but it shows you about that time they were earning absolute top dollar just to sell a product, and it didn't matter what it was, and they'd find a way to twist it,
Yeah.
manipulate it to make it something
Yeah.
sellable. Like, and there was a real interesting episode about butter, and they're talking about, right, we've got this stuff called margarine, we've got to market it,
Yeah.
and how do we do that? And I did a video about it myself, and it was like, and it's really funny because in the show he's going, it was obviously tastes crap compared to butter. So what can we say to make people buy it?
Yeah.
And that really has. My wife and I were watching it, the whole series actually, and we at the end of it we said this era has a massive part of what's to blame of current marketing culture because a lot of
Yeah. But like margarine, like for 20 years, the marketing campaign around margarine destroyed butter.
yeah
For 20 years, it destroyed butter sales. And it's only been the last couple of years that butter has made a huge comeback and has now been sitting at a record high price for like 3 years straight. Like that shows the power of marketing. But there's a but. I do think that what they done previously, the giant companies, I think that is now not able to be done because of social media,
absolutely.
because they don't have control.
And you don't have these sort of sudden surges to what they used to call the new money. You know, those kind of opportunities have all gone now, and it was an era that could never be replicated. And it's really interesting what you say about butter because um, I've noticed a shift in what's going on with butter lately, and we've pretty much always had butter in the house, but it was all about fat, and a lot of my customers I used to have. This is where I've learned a lot of my food industry stuff because in Cambridge you meet really well learned sort of foodies who are really interested in stuff, and a lot of them are really interesting people, and they all eat full fat, full meat, proper dairy, and I I remember even as a teenager you're told to not low fat this and don't eat sugars and all
Yeah,
that sort of stuff.
yeah,
These people were some of the fittest physically and mentally people I've ever met. And a lot of them were also not from the UK. they
yeah,
they would come here and they would go, "Your food here is crap, and I found your shop. I love it," kind of thing. And they go, "Oh my god,
yeah.
real dairy, real this," and we don't realize it's just an absolute culture of this country. To
UK has the highest intake of ultra processed foods in the EU.
Yeah, and
The highest percentage.
it's only because I don't know the actual real information, but I was speaking to a customer before, and they said there's a study done, let's say in the 50s, there'll be people watching, or you might even know about it, where doctors looked at sort of cadavers and things and of people that were dying and trying to work out what was going on, and they were finding literal fat in arteries and things like this. So they didn't understand the connection. They thought it must just be fat. And then there's a lot of the whole issue with the sugar industry. Coca-Cola did a lot of backhanders and under the carpet marketing, and as well. So they didn't ever get. They started off by not fully understanding actually what fat was, and so then it's just become a whole war on fat. And actually, fat's not the problem; it's just calorie surplus, and the
Correct.
calorie surplus is the problem. And I mean,
Yeah.
I carry a bit of extra weight, but I know why. I don't. It's not because of what I'm eating; it's how much of it. And I'm not stupid,
Yeah.
but uh, that's the problem. But I used to know a guy who was a fitness trainer and a very good one. And he said his biggest questions were used to be people would message him desperate, going, "I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm eating all this healthy stuff," and he would say it's literally calories in, calories out. He says there's no magic pill, there's no special anything, but we're taught and we don't realize because of everything that goes on here that it's such a simple thing, our food, and we are just missing out on massive opportunities to eat really good quality food because we're told not to, like butter. Butter, I mean, the nutrition in butter, but also for an industry like yours, um, where you got dairy farms making the product, which is a product local to where you live, and it's not necessarily anywhere more processed than anything else. It tastes good and it's full of nutrition. I don't understand the diff apart from the war on fat, which we don't really. It sort of falls back full circle into the whole thing about the carbon and methane emissions. You hear the word, don't fully understand it, so you sit on your side of it, which is you don't eat the fat and you don't eat the beef. And I just think this is why I try and do as much of this as I can on social media because hopefully one person will watch it and go, "All right, I never thought of it that way."
The public are definitely willing to be turned. And like the idea that we're going to see a 20% cut in dairy and meat consumption by 2030, which is in the UK's climate goals, is total nonsense. Like it's going the opposite direction. Consumption is increasing of meat and dairy. So, like, net zero is just not going to happen. You're not turning people's dietary habits. And one of the most interesting thing which happened in 2022, whenever the Ukraine war started, was that everyone's food prices massively increased. So the price of dairy went through the roof, price of beef went through the roof. And it was always thought that if prices of them staples increased, people would just go and buy something cheaper. They'd switch from butter to margarine, okay? They'd switch from steaks to chicken. But that just didn't happen because people are actually willing to pay more for the food that they want to eat. And that's been a really, really interesting little like nugget of information, which a lot of people didn't think would actually happen. But one of the alarming things, one of the cautionary notes to this idea that net zero will just die, I suppose, because consumers don't want it and they won't pay for it, is that I was at a conference in Ireland. It was called ESG and Dairy, so environmental social governance and how it relates to the dairy industry. And they had like all of the people from retailers there, the people from the processors. It wasn't a farmers event, it was kind of like further down the line. They had the head of the Irish Environmental Protection Agency there. And when I pointed out to them that as the survey, which clearly shows that people are not willing to pay for it. Another great example is Danone launched a low carbon milk in France and they stopped selling it after 18 months because no one was buying it. Whenever I pointed that out to them, their response was, well, we will make consumers pay for it. Like, this is the kind of people who are actually forcing this through, is people who have so much power that they are of the opinion that they could just force this on every single individual in the UK. And I was surprised by that answer. I was surprised that they'd be willing to try and force everyone down this route because of their opinion.
That's quite bad. And I think
Yeah,
it's funny because when I mean I do a lot on X or TikTok and things, and actually I find that the support on there is quite good. And and I don't think it's an echo chamber because I'm pulling in people new all the time. It's not like my sort of what I do doesn't change much or whatever. And people are more interested in eating properly, proper foods, and buying from farms. And I think things like Clarkson's Farm and YouTube and social media are starting to pull people to have a good idea of what's going on in farming. Again, it's just a case of um, out of sight and out of mind. And actually, I think a lot of people are like me who I can be a bit of a bumbler. I don't mean that horribly.
Yeah,
Carry on in your own bubble, do your thing until
yeah,
something comes into your bubble and go, hold on a minute.
yeah,
Then it ignites like the methane thing in my red.
yeah.
And that suddenly makes me, but I can get a bit obsessed with it then and a bit,
The public want to know this stuff.
yeah,
But the biggest issue is that the only people currently who are actually telling them this is you and me on social media, like actual farmers, because our industry has fundamentally failed us. Fundamentally failed us. And one of the perfect examples for me is Bovier, the methane inhibitors. Like the industry, the dairy industry, from our representatives in our unions right through to our processors and our retailers, they are determined that methane inhibitors are going to happen, and they do not care if the public don't want it, they're just going to hide it. They're just going to try and force it on farmers, hide it from the public, and they're going to force it on everyone, despite the fact that they make no sense at all. They are the only carbon mitigation measure where you get a limited benefit for a limited amount of time, but you have to pay for them forever. There is no other example.
and that will be you that pays for it.
Yeah, it'd be me who pays for it. Well, ultimately, it'll be a consumer because if I have to pay for it, I'm going out of business. So it'll be the consumer who has to pay for it because it'll drive up dairy prices. Now, this is the bit where you put on your tin hat and it's this like conspiracy theory, but you have to ask yourself, why would they want to drive up the price of meat and dairy? Why would they want to do that? They want to do that because then their alternatives become financially viable. So at the minute, lab-grown meat doesn't work because it's too expensive. At the minute, alternative milk products don't work because they're too expensive. But if they can make dairy more expensive, then their alternative products, which can be produced in a factory and don't require farmers, suddenly have a price, like they're not so price disadvantaged. And that is 100% what is behind this. And another great example, just to back that up with some facts and not just my theory, is that the investment firm behind Bovier also has £100 million invested in a fake meat company. Like, you know?
I read that Sainsbury's Future of Food report that was released in 2019. Hypothetical stories of the future, so it might have been Jimmy talks to his smart wrist microchip in 2050,
Yeah.
his food online or whatever. And that was pushing lab grown meat. That was pushing hydroponics in the desert and effectively saying how we won't then need farming. And Sainsbury's, etc., will have complete control over their food systems. They'll just become one massive hydroponic factory and they'll print their own protein, essentially. And it's funny how they released something like that, and that was 6 years ago now. Yet it's all starting to come to fruition, and there's always a battle in
It's
these.
all falling apart. It's all falling apart in front of us.
Because 20,
Like Oatly's share value is down 95%. The largest vertical farm in the UK just closed a month ago. Like the people have invested billions in this, like investment firms have put billions down this route, and it's all falling apart in front of them. And they're really, really unwilling to let it go. And that is why we still have the pressure coming from our retailers and our banks. It's because behind all of that is the investment firms. And that's not a conspiracy. You go chat to Asda, go chat to Tesco's, and they will tell you that the reason why they're trying to push for carbon audits on farms is not because of consumers, it's because of their investors. Big banks will tell you the same thing. Why is my bank, Danske Bank, so obsessed with doing a carbon footprint so I can get a loan from them? It's because the people who have the money to back them up have decided that that's important. And why have they decided that that's important? Why do the people who have billions invested all over the world decide that it's important that farmers go along with this carbon thing? Probably because they have a lot of other investments in fossil fuel industries. Like, it's not a giant conspiracy. It's pretty blatantly obvious.
fine though your followers on social media. Like I don't have that many, but the ones that I do have are actually quite grateful because they go, "I didn't know that."
Yeah, oh
Like,
yeah, 100%.
oh my god, I didn't know. And it's something you don't realize. You've just almost as something a comment you've even thrown out, or just
Yeah.
you said, and they I get messages all the time saying, I didn't know that. Thank you very much. I'm like, oh, I made that in 10 seconds because I was just doing a job or, or whatever. And you don't even,
I will warn you, the deeper you go, the more unbelievable the stuff that goes on. Like there is stuff which I can't say in a video because I've been warned not to say it.
oh, really?
But like I'll give you an example, okay? Because it's kind of old now. Hopefully they'll not come for me. But in Northern Ireland, we had this big blow up over Loch Ness about how there was blue-green algae, which is a bacteria, growing in Loch Ness. And I sort of got into the details of it and I really like tried to figure out what was going on. This is like 3 years ago now. And the environmental agency here in Northern Ireland held 6 meetings around the country where they only invited councillors and the media, like BBC, Sky News, and they gave them a presentation and sort of put out a narrative as to what was causing the problem. And there was one graph in that presentation which I got through an NGO who happened to go that was at it. And the graph showed a huge spike in nitrates. And they'd circled this big spike in nitrates. And they'd used that to say that the problem with Loch Ness was caused by nitrates from dairy farms. And that was what was reported in the BBC. That's what was reported in Sky News. You can go back and watch the news reports, and they'll have pictures of dairy cows saying that dairy cows have caused the problem. But the issue I had was that I had also found a research document from AFBI, which is a research institute here in Northern Ireland, who'd done a study on Loch Ness the year before about blue-green algae, and they had stated in that research journal that a reduction in nitrates released more phosphorus, which then made the algae worse.
Well,
I had this problem where the research document was saying that nitrates, if there was less nitrates, it caused a problem, but our environmental agency was going around telling the media that there was a spike in nitrates that was causing the problem. And so what I done was I contacted a local politician and asked to get the data set that they'd used to come up with this graph. And long story short, I spent months trying to get the data. Eventually, they said they sent it to me, but they didn't send it to me. They sent me just a load of nonsense in a spreadsheet that ended in February of that year when I needed up to September. So I just left it. I gave up, couldn't get it. Then I tried again 6 months ago with another politician to get the same data. And this time they just flat out refused. I got a reply back saying that the data had not been collated yet, so it was not available to be released publicly. Fast forward to 2 months ago, and I got another politician to ask again for the data, and I got a response from the head of the Department of Agriculture through this politician to say that the data didn't exist and that they didn't record it, right? So I was like, I have the data that you had recorded 3 years ago, just not up to when I wanted, and now you're telling me it doesn't exist. And then 3 weeks ago, they finally released the data in a little PDF that was accompanied to the Nitrates Action Program, and it showed the graph going right up to current day. And you have a huge spike at the start of 2022, and it drops way down to a really low level when all of the algae was happening. So the Department of the Environment here in Northern Ireland cherry-picked data to make it look really bad and blamed nitrates for a problem and briefed the media on it just to create some sort of blame on dairy farms. Like, what? It's honestly unbelievable that they would do that. It's unbelievable.
I, I just don't really. It takes you. Oh, it makes me speechless. It really does.
It's individuals, civil servants who are never questioned on anything because no one else ever bothers to ask questions. And they've got away with it for years. And it's just insane. It's totally insane.
Because of what we do for our jobs, we do a lot completely for ourselves. We even build our own stuff. You know, I do my own accounts. There's so much I do myself, and it makes me very independent. And I think when you do like what we do, you realize that other people don't see what's going on with things like governments, and you feel like you could go in government and do a better job. And like you see what's
Oh,
going
you definitely could.
I think it makes me more cross, but because because you do so much yourself and you rely on yourself so much, the only problems that you ever have are exterior factors that pop into your bubble and make your life difficult. And you go, well, and you just go, well, why? Like these, like
Yeah.
rules, red tape, or red tractor, like you were saying before. And other times you get rules and regulations and things thrown at you, and you're just like, this is just ridiculous. Like when you go to, like, I take livestock in
Yeah.
the market and things like that, and like, I fill in all the forms and I do it all properly. But all the people who work at these places, they don't know what the forms are, and they go, "Oh, just sign them." No one knows what they're signing, and it's all
Yeah.
bureaucratic red tape nonsense to tick a box, for but it still goes against you. And do you find that in farming? Do you feel because you are in such control of your own life most of the time, including everything around it, that the exterior noises that come in and interrupt it make it even more frustrating?
Well, that's why farmers are so fed up with this stuff. It's because they are entirely independent in their everyday life.
Yeah,
And that makes them extremely resistant to people trying to tell them what to do. They've literally been self-employed their entire life, and then you have a government who is trying to impose ridiculous regulations on them, like ridiculous regulations. So of course they're not going to accept it. And like this is one of the things I definitely capitalize on is that farmers want someone to stand up for them and they want someone to say no. They want someone to say, we're not putting up with this. But our unions, like, they just don't do that. So then you have this huge gap. There's a void of leadership within agriculture. And I've definitely capitalized on that, which has been good. But it's the difference then of trying to like actually achieve something rather than just shouting from the sidelines. That's the more difficult part.
do you feel like what you're doing with all of your channels, etc., is making a difference to other farmers? I mean, I think it makes a difference. But I enjoy watching them, and my children now watch them. And I mean, I see, like, you get a lot of interaction.
It makes way bigger difference than people realize. Like, see around the carbon methane stuff. Like, I can pretty confidently quantify what effect I have had because there is no one else doing the same thing. Like, there's no one else who is making videos about methane, okay? But I know for a fact that I have caused so many problems for sustainability managers in our dairy companies.
That's
Like,
brilliant.
I know for a fact. And that's my goal. That is my goal. My goal is to make farmers really, really angry, to make them the most difficult people ever. And if they're sitting, what I want to happen is if a farmer is sitting in a meeting and someone from AHDB or from Arla stands up and starts chatting about carbon, I want the whole room to kick off. I want them to be like, hold on a minute. I'm not going along with this when 70% of their emissions are totally fictional. Like, it's insane. So that's like why I try and do it, is just to make sure farmers know that they are being unfairly targeted and that their industry isn't going to help them because all they want is an easy life and they can go home at 5 o'clock. So it is up to farmers themselves to stand up for themselves and to say, we're not accepting this.
Do you find it adds a lot of pressure to your video? Do you try? Is it a vein
Yeah.
you're going down, or does it just come to you and go and you think, I'll make a video about
I
something?
won't I won't make a video unless I have a good idea. So unless I know it's going to work well, I won't make a bad video. Does that make sense? Especially if it's an important topic. So we had a review here in Northern Ireland called the Nitrates Action Program, and it's a total farce. It's fallen apart. There was like a vote in Stormont that basically said this is never going to pass, so change it. It was total farce. But for like 2 weeks after it came out, a lot of people had messaged me being like, "Are you going to make a video about NAP?" But I just didn't have the idea. I didn't know how to make it interesting. But then I was going to seal bales that had punctured, birds had punctured one day, and I was like, you know what? This is a great analogy to use for a video. because I'm patching up holes. I'm finding holes and I'm fixing them. And that's basically what I done with the nap review was find holes and then provide a solution which would actually fix it.
You write
So
your ideas down.
no, I tried doing that. The Farm Theory news videos were kind of like scripted, but I kind of lost the personality, so I stopped.
I've done that before with things. I got asked to do a video in Cambridge once, and they were telling me what to say, and I couldn't do it. And when I did stand up comedy, I just used to write down vague bullet points just in case I forgot. If I have to read
Yeah.
from a script, I turn into a robot. I can't do it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's the same. Yeah, I'll do like vague points maybe, or I'll do the research beforehand, and then I'll have it in my head. And generally, what I need for a video really is just the first line. Like I really like TikTok. I don't like YouTube. YouTube is just it's a lot of work. Yes, it pays well, but it just doesn't have that same sort of like fun aspect.
Yeah.
Whereas like TikTok, I just think is like just more fun, you
TikTok
know?
has completely changed my opinion on social media. I
Yeah.
completely, and I think it's got a bad rep for being about dances. Because whenever I say I do things on TikTok, people go, "Oh, isn't it just for kids?" And actually, it couldn't be further from the truth. There are so
Yeah.
many people on TikTok, and they're all very interested in well, farming and the animals and everything like
Also, TikTok has a way bigger reach
yeah,
than people realize. Like I hear people talking about Facebook views, but they're not real views, they're impressions. That
yeah,
means someone scrolled past it on their page, you know? It
yeah,
doesn't mean that they watched your video.
yeah,
Whereas on TikTok, if your video is going to get pushed to people, so it gets significant views, it's going to need to be watched.
yeah,
Like you're going to have like 10% of people completing the video. And what I do in TikTok is I make fairly long videos for TikTok, like 3 or 4 minutes, sometimes even longer. So I think it just works for me. Like that's a good length if you want to get a message across.
yeah,
It's long enough that you can give detail, but it's short enough that it's not going to be boring. Whereas on YouTube, like if you're trying to make a 10 or 15-minute video about carbon emissions, people are going to be bored. Like it's just not possible.
well, I my best video on TikTok was when I skinned the baby lamb that died and put it on another, and because the mother had rejected its lamb,
Yeah.
and we'd had a lamb die that morning that was a few days old, so I took the skin off and didn't show the actual skinning. I just showed them a picture of the skin and put it on,
Yeah.
and that one I don't get massive views because I've got just under I think or 7,500 followers. I haven't got that many followers on TikTok yet, but that went really big for my profile, and I don't actually know why, but everyone loved it, and a lot of people weren't sure about it, and I think it's
So
a little
I
area.
the way I do TikTok is very analytical. Like I kind of understand what will work. First thing, followers don't matter. Like they don't matter at all on TikTok. It's not that it just shows videos to your followers. Second thing is what matters is that you do different stuff. So if I see 4 of your videos and they all start in the same way, I feel like I've seen it before, I'm more than likely going to skip it in the first 2 seconds. And if I start skipping your videos, TikTok's going to say, right, he's not interested in Ben anymore. We'll not show him any more Ben's videos. So you have to do stuff that's different so that people don't know what to expect. So they at least hang around for a while because that's what really matters. And I see so many people making the same videos over and over again. And it's like, why? No one's going to watch this. Another really good tip that I try and do is you have to always provide something to the audience. So like, where am I adding value to you for watching this? So that's where it can be humorous, it can be entertaining, it can be information. That's a really good one. But there has to be some sort of exchange. Whereas a lot of people I see on TikTok, they make a video, it's all about themselves, and there's literally nothing in it for the person watching. Like,
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like they're telling you what they do in a day. No one cares what you do in a day. Do you know what I mean? And then the final thing, which really helps TikTok videos, is engagement. So, especially shares. So, if you can get your video shared through a WhatsApp group, you're flying. So, that's why the controversial videos kind of do better because you need people to be engaged.
That's cool. Thank you very much. I've always I'm, TikTok. I really think TikTok has got the potential to do big things for what we do. And I only started really doing social media because I've got my meat website, and I
Yeah.
thought, well, I'm going to have to find a way to sell to people. And in fact, it's a bit like you can't go greedy with it, but I almost never post about what I sell. And ironically, that leads to more sales than me posting what I'm selling that week all the time.
Yeah. So
Maybe
a
that's
good
what
example.
you're saying.
I'll give you a good example. In January, I had a steak every day. Just because I need more iron in my life. I need protein. So I do eat steaks quite a lot. But in January, I thought I'll eat a steak every day. And I framed the video as I was going to cancel a vegan. So that was my intro. I was holding two steaks and I was like, I'm going to cancel a vegan for Veganuary. And it's like, that's all you need for a video is the intro.
Yeah.
You know, if you've seen that, you're going to be like, why is he holding steaks? What does he mean he's going to cancel a
How,
vegan?
how well
Like,
did your oat milk one do? Because I thought the intro to that was very different.
yeah, it done very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I,
again, the intro to that was, if I had made a video and I had started with, I want to talk about oat milk,
yeah.
it's like, no one cares. But starting it with like, when I said something about Ollie blogs
Yeah.
selling oat milk or something, it's like people are then like,
Yeah.
hold on a minute, what's this? Give me a good intro.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool.
And also like I did get like Ollie wasn't too happy with that.
Oh,
Okay. But
you should, you think
but
the funny side of it.
it wasn't number one, it wasn't about him. It was about the oat milk. It was about Alpro. And two, he was paid to promote it. So it's kind of like if
No,
you're gonna promote something like that, you gotta expect some backlash.
well, that's
You
cool.
know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and is that sort of falls nicely? I think I've got to get my kids soon, so I'll make this the last question.
Yeah, it's
But
okay. I have to go do milking too.
yes, it's school time. But so, where do you see your socials and things going from now?
I am increasingly getting more and more political. Um, and I think that's maybe an avenue which I can make it useful because at the end of the day, the problem in farming at the minute is politics and
Yeah.
bad policy. And to get that changed, it's going to require politics and politicians. So the way I frame it is I want to try and make agriculture more attractive to politicians. So if there's politicians who support agriculture, I want to highlight that. And if there's politicians who don't support agriculture, I want to try and destroy their lives, essentially. And it's about creating a narrative. So at the minute, I'm really heavily trying to hammer the civil service because the senior civil service here in Northern Ireland are an absolute disgrace. Like they're an absolute joke. And I'm really trying to turn everyone against them. And it's been very successful. But that's the goal. Like there was a meeting held in Greenmount 2 weeks ago on NAP. There was five civil servants at the front of the room and they got an absolute, like, they got a hammering. 700 farmers showed up. The first meeting they done 2 weeks previous, 20 farmers showed up. Why did 700 farmers show up? In part, in part, because of a group of people on TikTok in Northern Ireland encouraging people to go.
Fantastic.
And the politicians who were there who supported what we were saying, they got a huge amount of credibility out of it. They got a standing ovation in the room. That is making sticking up for farmers extremely politically attractive.